this is so um over the top, really. Generally, um, first of all, right, like one of the more unrealistic aspects of it is that the 49th minute, thereabouts, there is barbed wire. Like, how the hell can people jump over the barbed wire? It's so bizarre. Like, it doesn't even attempt realism. Oh, and soon after, he locks the dogs inside the car, and somehow the dogs cannot get up from the broken window. Like, what, did they just forget it was a broken window? Like, he literally just used to get into the car. Now, while, um, I mean, this is a fairly one-dimensional movie, at any rate, right? Mostly it is one-dimensional, simply, despite there is the end where, 45 minutes or so, but just before the end, there, supposedly, he, frees that, count, what are they called? Counter agents or something? Double agents, yeah. Um, but that's nonsense, really. I mean, in comparison to what happened before, as absolute nonsense, really. I mean, this is generally the problem with this movie, along with many other movies for that matter, where when they create, just supposed protagonists that aren't really, just I mean, I don't know. I mean, sure, people can relate to a revenge story, but it makes no sense, and this one makes no sense. Like he's really grasping for straws here when he just tries to imagine someone else as being the person he wanted to originally kill, just because he never really got a chance to really when he repeatedly stabbed him just because someone else shot him first. Oh, it's ridiculous. What is this? Some sort of extended revenge? No, he's just a psycho. He's not. It's not someone anyone can relate to. No, unless somehow they have some sort of weird. They literally said on the sheets there for when they try to diagnose him. Their own CIA doctor, whoever it was, that he has obsessions and violent tendencies. And guess what? He thought he was ideal material. Wow. Honestly, don't know if they really do that in real life, but that would be something. Yeah. Um, well, I mean, why don't you just employ serial killers? Just to, I'm sure they'd be even more ideal at this rate. Anyway, point is, it makes no sense that he went back to free that the double agent just because uh, her supposed uncle and from my understanding intelligence agent as well. I thought makes no sense either that he was an intelligence agent just because apparently his relatives were known to be against war supposedly that their own state was trying to wage. Makes no sense. But why would then the same state employ him as a counter agent and later on shoot him dead? It makes no sense. But then again, nobody accuses these sort of movies of making any sense. The biggest problem, so clearly, is this Mitch character. Honestly, he's completely unrelatable. Very ironic that he was calling someone else a piece of shit when that is exactly what he is himself, and he proves to be throughout the entire movie. Uh, one would think that he'd be sort of developing other dimensions. I mean, he's not one dimensional when he saves her from, but not really. Not really. It doesn't even make sense. And then suddenly he's apologizing. Apologizing? Really? He's insane. He attacks her straight after uh, she helps him bandage him up. and then he's sorry for her uncle dying, like he didn't even know who he was before. None of this makes sense. And oh yeah, later on he actually trusts her enough to give her the gun. So this move is so idiotic and extreme that he goes from nearly killing her by drowning to handing her a gun. So she could theoretically finish the mission after nearly killing her. Yeah. Oh wow, wow. Yeah, very believable. So believable. Yeah, loads believable. Oh yeah, and just soon later, yeah, he just materializes a car out of nowhere instantaneously. Wow, did you grab? Wow. And of course, at the very end, just like so many other movies, admittedly, we get the supposed protagonist who loses so much throughout the entire fight, and at the very end, somehow manages to turn the tables. Whoa! Just to add to the percentage of disbelief, yeah, which I'm sure the scriptwriters and scene makers or whatever thing is somehow think makes the movie better, when in reality it makes it worse. Not that, mind you, disbelief, and the unbelievability factor is necessarily the worst thing. I mean, I like fantasy movies. It's just, this is not meant to be one. It's supposed to be some sort of, realistic. It's really not. Though. So I'd rather have Star Wars set in outer space with them lightsabers and the Force than this nonsense. This somehow there's always Deus Ex Machina and somehow whatever. Anyway. So yeah. Anyway, the point is. It's a sordid, cliched movie, as critics have said as well. Though for some reason, it has 45%. Which, like, I don't know. This is 45%, then wow, whatever. Anyway, yeah, it makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. None of it makes sense. It's just purely adrenaline infused nonsense, pretty much. And the only thing that even remotely made any sort of, well, it was somewhat entertaining and sort of interesting. But honestly, man, this is literally follow up. I mean, this was such a long movie. It's just idiotic, right? I mean, it's like they say, yeah. How can we make it as boring as possible? Oh yeah, let's say. No, they probably thought it wasn't boring, actually, considering I mean, it was action filled, but that only really translates into a boredom in my mind, really, unless it has an interesting story, which this did not. But yeah, I mean, the point is, it was filled with factual errors as well, as evidenced by the goofs on IMDb. It's absolutely unbelievable. Like, I mean, even for someone who doesn't really know much about the technical details, I'm sure there's many others who do, and listed them there, and there's a ton of them. So I mean, regardless of that, even if they're trying to be, they couldn't care less about any sort of facts here. They only cared about, oh, let's punch each other out, let's drown each other, and oh wow, and they probably thought, yeah, this is the most entertaining thing ever. So now, honestly, the only thing that was even remotely entertaining was the ending there when they tried to depict how a nuclear bomb would go off underwater. This is CGI that followed was honestly interesting, but that CGI is usually interesting, unless it's meant to just replicate the same thing that exists in reality. So that was interesting the way it happened. In a way, it's sort of similar to like the Perfect Storm. It had a mostly boring story as well, but the CGI was interesting, I suppose, in that sense. Just not the characters themselves. The same with this. The characters were interesting. Mitch was completely it just I really hope they don't do 14 other movies, right? This is the most boring, and he is the most uninteresting character ever. Like, his Maze Runner character must be way more interesting than this. I watched it a few years ago. This is the most uninspiring drivel, honestly. It's the most boring and yet idiotic at the same time movie.